Arrival and initial disappointment. Zaxlor stepped out of his sleek interstellar pod, his four eyes blinking rapidly to adjust to Earth's harsh sunlight. The spaceport bustled with activity, a cacophony of sounds and smells assaulting his senses. He'd come to Earth on a whim, enticed by glowing reviews from fellow Centaurian travelers about the quaint charm of this backwater planet. Now, as he surveyed the chaos around him, he was beginning to regret his decision. A harried-looking human approached, waving a digital tablet. "Welcome to Earth Spaceport 1. I'm Jake, your assigned liaison. May I scan your travel chip?" Zaxlor extended his arm, revealing the glowing blue chip embedded in his silvery skin. Jake ran his tablet over it, nodding as the information appeared on his screen. "All right, Mr. Zaxlor, everything seems to be in order. Your tourist visa is good for 1 Earth month. Do you have any questions before we proceed to customs?" Zaxlor's upper set of eyes narrowed while his lower set darted around, taking in the dilapidated state of the spaceport. "Yes, I do have a question. Is this truly the best Earth has to offer for interstellar arrivals? I was led to believe your planet had made significant advancements in the past century." Jake's smile faltered slightly. "Well, sir, Earth Spaceport 1 is still relatively new. We're constantly making improvements." "Clearly not quickly enough," Zaxlor interrupted. "Very well, let's proceed with this customs process." As they made their way through the spaceport, Zaxlor's disappointment only grew. The air was thick with pollutants, making his sensitive respiratory system work overtime. Humans rushed about in a disorganized frenzy, bumping into each other and barely acknowledging their surroundings. It was a far cry from the orderly efficiency of Centauri Prime. After a tedious customs process that involved far too many questions about whether he was bringing any organic matter to Earth, as if he'd risk contaminating his person with Earth bacteria, Zaxlor finally emerged from the spaceport into the heart of New York City. The sensory overload was immediate and overwhelming. Towering structures of glass and steel stretched towards the sky, their surfaces reflecting the sunlight in a dizzying array of patterns. Ground vehicles belched noxious fumes as they crawled along congested roadways. Humans of all shapes and sizes hurried along the sidewalks, many with their eyes glued to primitive handheld devices. "Welcome to the Big Apple," Jake said enthusiastically. "What would you like to see first? We got world-famous museums, incredible restaurants, beautiful parks." "I'd like to see my accommodation," Zaxlor cut in. "I find myself in need of rest after this stimulating arrival." Jake nodded, looking slightly deflated. "Of course, sir. I'll escort you to your hotel." The journey to the hotel was no less chaotic than the spaceport. Their ground transport, a yellow vehicle Jake called a taxi, weaved through traffic with a reckless abandon that had Zaxlor gripping his seat with all 4 of his arms. The driver, a burly human with an impressive amount of facial hair, shouted incomprehensible phrases at other vehicles and pedestrians alike. "Is this mode of transport considered safe?" Zaxlor asked, his voice tight with tension. Jake laughed. "Oh yeah, New York cabs are an experience. Don't worry, these guys know what they're doing." Zaxlor was not reassured. When they finally arrived at the hotel, a tall building with a gaudy golden entrance, Zaxlor was relieved to step onto solid ground. The hotel lobby was marginally better than the street, with its polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers, but it still paled in comparison to the elegant simplicity of Centaurian architecture. As Jake helped him check in, Zaxlor overheard a commotion near the entrance. A human female was arguing with a staff member, gesticulating wildly at a small furry creature she held in her arms. "What is that commotion about?" Zaxlor asked, his curiosity momentarily overriding his irritation. Jake glanced over. "Oh, looks like someone's trying to bring their dog into the hotel. Some places have strict no-pet policies." "Dog?" Zaxlor's lower eyes blinked in confusion. "Is that some sort of bioengineered companion?" Jake chuckled. "No, nothing like that. Dogs are just animals we've domesticated over thousands of years." They're pets, companions. A lot of humans consider them part of the family. Zaxlor's upper eyes widened in disbelief. You allow non-sentient creatures to cohabitate with you. How unsanitary. Before Jake could respond, the hotel manager approached with Zaxlor's room key. My apologies for the disturbance, sir. Please, allow me to escort you to your suite. As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Zaxlor found his thoughts drifting back to the strange furry creature. He'd studied Earth's flora and fauna briefly before his trip, but he hadn't realized humans kept them as companions. How odd. The suite, at least, met some of Zaxlor's standards. It was spacious, with large windows offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. The manager demonstrated the various amenities: climate control, entertainment systems, food synthesizers, before leaving Zaxlor to settle in. As soon as he was alone, Zaxlor sank into the nearest chair, all four of his arms drooping with exhaustion. He gazed out at the city, watching as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was beautiful, in a chaotic sort of way, but it did little to lift his spirits. He activated his personal communicator, a sleek device that projected a holographic screen before him. With a few gestures, he began recording a message to send back to his family on Centauri Prime. Greetings, dear ones. I have arrived safely on Earth, though I find myself questioning the wisdom of this journey. This planet is primitive, to say the least. The humans have barely mastered basic interplanetary travel, and their cities are a cluttered mess of inefficiency. He paused, considering his next words carefully. The air is polluted, the transport systems are dangerous, and the humans themselves seem to be in a constant state of frenzy. I've only been here a few hours, and already I long for the peace and order of home. With a sigh, he continued, I will fulfill my obligation to document this world for our cultural exchange program, but I doubt I will find much of value here. The humans are centuries behind us in nearly every aspect of civilization. I fail to see what we could possibly learn from them. He ended the recording and sent it off, knowing it would take several hours to reach Centauri Prime. As he waited for a response, Zaxlor decided to review the itinerary Jake had provided. Tomorrow would be a tour of some of New York's most famous landmarks, followed by a visit to a human educational institution. Zaxlor's upper eyes narrowed as he read through the schedule. It all seemed so mundane. Statues, buildings, museums filled with artifacts from Earth's brief history. What could any of this possibly teach him? As night fell over the city, Zaxlor found himself unable to rest. The constant noise from the streets below, the honking of vehicles, the chatter of humans, the occasional siren, grated on his nerves. On Centauri Prime, cities were designed to minimize noise pollution. Here, it seemed to be embraced. He paced the suite, all four of his eyes darting from one window to another, taking in the glittering lights of the nighttime skyline. It was beautiful, in its way, but so wasteful. Didn't humans understand the importance of energy conservation? As he turned away from the window, something caught his eye. A small device sat on the bedside table, with a note attached. Curious, Zaxlor picked it up. For our extraterrestrial guests, the note read, this white noise machine can help simulate a variety of soothing soundscapes to aid in relaxation and sleep. We hope it makes your stay more comfortable. Zaxlor examined the device skeptically. After a moment's hesitation, he activated it. Instantly, the room was filled with the soft sound of rainfall. Despite himself, Zaxlor felt some of the tension leave his body. The gentle patter of water droplets was not unlike the soothing harmonics used for relaxation on Centauri Prime. Settling onto the bed, which was surprisingly comfortable despite its primitive design, Zaxlor allowed the artificial rainscape to wash over him. As he drifted off to sleep, his last conscious thought was a reluctant admission that perhaps, just perhaps, humans were not entirely without ingenuity. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the sounds of the awakening city penetrating even through the hotel's thick windows. Zaxlor rose, feeling somewhat refreshed despite the alien environment. He had to admit, grudgingly, that the white noise machine had been effective. As he prepared for the day ahead, using the suite's admittedly impressive hygiene facilities, Zaxlor tried to approach his upcoming tour with an open mind. Yes, Earth was primitive compared to Centauri Prime, but he was here to learn. Surely there must be something of value to be found. A chime from his communicator alerted him to an incoming message. It was a response from his family back home. With a gesture, he opened the holographic display. His life mate's familiar face appeared, all four eyes crinkling in a smile. "Greetings, my dear Zaxlor. We received your message and are glad you arrived safely. However, we are concerned by your initial impressions. Remember, love, that different does not necessarily mean inferior. The cultural exchange program is about understanding, not judgment. Try to look beyond the surface and see the essence of human culture. We eagerly await your next update. May the stars guide your path." Zaxlor felt a pang of guilt as the message ended. His life mate was right, of course. He had allowed his discomfort and preconceptions to color his perceptions. With renewed determination, he finished his preparations and headed down to meet Jake for the day's tour. As he stepped out of the hotel into the morning sunlight, Zaxlor made a silent promise to himself. He would approach this strange, chaotic world with fresh eyes. Somewhere beneath the noise and the pollution and the inefficiency, there had to be something worth discovering about humanity. And he, Zaxlor of Centauri Prime, would find it. Unexpected encounter. The morning sun beat down on Zaxlor's silvery skin as he followed Jake through the bustling streets of New York City. Despite his resolution to keep an open mind, he found himself overwhelmed by the cacophony of sounds, smells, and sights that assaulted his senses at every turn. "First stop, Central Park," Jake announced cheerfully, leading Zaxlor towards a vast expanse of green amidst the towering skyscrapers. As they entered the park, Zaxlor's four eyes widened in surprise. The chaos of the city seemed to fall away, replaced by a relative oasis of calm. Humans lounged on the grass, strolled along winding paths, or paddled boats on a serene lake. "This is unexpected," Zaxlor admitted, his upper eyes scanning the treetops while his lower set took in the diverse array of humans enjoying the park. Jake grinned. "Pretty cool, huh? Central Park is like the lungs of the city. It gives people a place to relax, exercise, or just enjoy nature without leaving Manhattan." As they walked deeper into the park, Zaxlor found himself reluctantly impressed by the foresight of the humans who had preserved this green space in the heart of their metropolis. Perhaps they weren't as short-sighted as he had initially assumed. Suddenly, a small furry creature darted across their path, followed closely by a young human female. "Buddy, come back here," she called out, laughing as she chased after the animal. Zaxlor recoiled, all four of his arms raising in a defensive posture. "What is that creature? Is it dangerous?" Jake chuckled. "That's just a dog, like the one you saw at the hotel yesterday. They're pets, remember. Totally harmless. Well, mostly." Before Zaxlor could respond, the young woman caught up to her pet, scooping the small, wriggling creature into her arms. She noticed Zaxlor and Jake watching and approached them with a smile. "I'm so sorry about that," she said, slightly out of breath. Buddy here got a little overexcited. He's still learning to behave on his leash. She extended her hand to Zaxlor. "I'm Sarah, by the way. You must be one of our extraterrestrial visitors. Welcome to Earth." Zaxlor stared at her outstretched hand, then at the furry creature in her arms. After a moment's hesitation, he reached out one of his four hands to shake hers. "I am Zaxlor of Centauri Prime. This, Buddy, is your companion." Sarah's smile widened. "That's right. Buddy's been my best friend for about 2 years now. Would you like to pet him?" Zaxlor's upper eyes blinked rapidly in surprise while his lower set narrowed in uncertainty. I'm not sure that would be advisable. Is it sanitary?" Sarah laughed, a sound that Zaxlor found surprisingly pleasant. "Oh, don't worry. Buddy's very clean. I give him baths regularly, and he just had a checkup at the vet last week. Here, let me show you." Before Zaxlor could protest, Sarah gently took one of his hands and placed it on Buddy's head. The alien froze, expecting. Well, he wasn't sure what he expected, but the sensation of the dog's soft fur under his fingers was unlike anything he had experienced before. Buddy looked up at Zaxlor with large brown eyes, his tail wagging furiously. Then, to Zaxlor's utter shock, the small creature stretched up and licked his hand. "Oh!" Zaxlor exclaimed, pulling his hand back. But instead of disgust, he felt a strange warmth spreading through him. He licked me." Sarah nodded, still smiling. "That means he likes you. Dogs show affection through licking. It's their way of giving kisses." Zaxlor stared at Buddy, then at his own hand, then back at the dog. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out again. This time, when he stroked Buddy's fur, the dog let out a contented sigh and leaned into his touch. "Remarkable," Zaxlor murmured. "On Centauri Prime, we have nothing like this. Our fauna is largely utilitarian, bred for food or scientific research. The idea of keeping an animal as a friend is entirely foreign to us." Jake, who had been watching this interaction with amusement, chimed in. "Humans have been domesticating animals for thousands of years. Dogs were probably the first, bred from wolves to help with hunting and protection. Over time, they became more than just tools. They became companions." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. Buddy here isn't just a pet, he's family. He comforts me when I'm sad, celebrates with me when I'm happy, and is always there when I need a friend. Plus, taking care of him teaches responsibility and empathy." Zaxlor tilted his head, considering this. "Fascinating. And this relationship is mutual? The animal also derives benefit?" "Absolutely," Sarah replied. "We provide them with food, shelter, medical care, and love. In return, they give us unconditional affection and loyalty. It's a symbiotic relationship that's evolved over millennia." As if to demonstrate, Buddy chose that moment to shower Sarah's face with enthusiastic licks, causing her to giggle and gently push him away. Okay, I love you too, you big goofball." Zaxlor watched this display of affection with growing interest. He had come to Earth expecting to find a primitive, chaotic world with little to offer his advanced civilization. Yet here, in this green oasis in the middle of a bustling city, he had encountered something entirely new and unexpected. "Would you like to join us for a bit?" Sarah asked. "I was just about to take Buddy to the dog park. You could see how dogs interact with each other and with different humans." Zaxlor glanced at Jake, who nodded encouragingly. "It's not on our official itinerary," the liaison said, "but I think it could be a valuable cultural experience." After a moment's consideration, Zaxlor nodded. "Yes, I believe I would like that very much." As they walked towards the dog park, Zaxlor found himself peppering Sarah with questions about Earth's pets. How many different species did humans domesticate? What were the legal and ethical considerations of pet ownership? How did the presence of these animals affect human social structures? Sarah answered each question patiently, her obvious love for Buddy and all animals shining through in her enthusiastic responses. By the time they reached the dog park, Zaxlor's head was spinning with new information and ideas. The dog park itself was a revelation. Dozens of dogs of all shapes and sizes romped and played together, their human companions chatting and laughing on benches around the perimeter. Zaxlor watched in fascination as Buddy raced off to join a game of chase with a group of larger dogs, his little legs pumping furiously. "Aren't you worried?" Zaxlor asked Sarah, his lower eyes tracking Buddy's progress while his upper set scanned the rest of the park. "Those other dogs are much larger. Could they not harm him?" Sarah shook her head, smiling. "Dogs are generally very good at self-regulating their play. The bigger ones know to be gentle with the smaller ones, and if things do get too rough, the humans step in. See, She pointed to where a human was separating two dogs that had started growling at each other. The situation was resolved quickly and calmly, with both dogs trotting off to play with others. As they watched the dogs play, Zaxlor found himself oddly moved by the scene. The pure joy exhibited by these animals, their uninhibited play and affection, stirred something deep within him. He thought back to his own childhood on Centauri Prime, where efficiency and productivity were prized above all else. Had he ever experienced such carefree happiness? "You know," Sarah said, breaking into his thoughts, "there's a saying here on Earth. Be the person your dog thinks you are. It means that our pets see the best in us, love us unconditionally, and inspire us to live up to that ideal." Zaxlor considered this, his 4 eyes blinking thoughtfully. A curious concept. On Centauri Prime, we strive for perfection through rigorous self-improvement and societal pressure. The idea of an external being inspiring us to be better through love is quite foreign. Sarah nodded. "It's not always easy, but I think it's worth it. The bond between humans and their pets can be incredibly powerful and transformative." As if on cue, Buddy came bounding back to them, his tongue lolling out and his tail wagging furiously. Without thinking, Zaxlor reached down to pat the dog's head, marveling at the softness of his fur and the warmth of his body. Buddy responded by placing his front paws on Zaxlor's leg, looking up at him with what the alien could only describe as adoration. For a moment, Zaxlor felt a connection to this small, furry creature that transcended species and planets. "I think he likes you," Sarah said softly, her eyes twinkling. Zaxlor nodded, a strange lump forming in his throat. I believe I like him too." As they left the dog park and bid farewell to Sarah and Buddy, Zaxlor found himself lost in thought. This unexpected encounter had shaken his preconceptions about Earth and its inhabitants. Perhaps there was more to learn from this planet than he had initially believed. Jake, noticing Zaxlor's pensive mood, asked, "So, what did you think of your first close encounter with Earth's pets?" Zaxlor was quiet for a moment before responding. I think I have much to reconsider about my assumptions regarding your species and your planet. This relationship between humans and animals, it is unlike anything we have on Centauri Prime. It speaks to a capacity for empathy and connection that I had not anticipated." Jake smiled. "That's great to hear, Zaxlor. And you know what? This is just the beginning. There's so much more to discover about Earth and humanity. Are you ready for the rest of our tour?" For the first time since his arrival, Zaxlor felt a genuine spark of excitement and curiosity. "Yes," he said, his 4 eyes bright with interest. "Yes, I believe I am." As they continued their exploration of New York City, Zaxlor found himself looking at everything with new eyes. The chaos and noise that had so overwhelmed him before now seemed like a vibrant tapestry of life. And at every turn, he noticed the presence of pets, dogs being walked on leashes, cats peering from apartment windows, even the occasional exotic bird perched on a human's shoulder. Each sighting reminded him of Buddy and the unexpected lesson he had learned in Central Park. Perhaps, Zaxlor mused, he had been too hasty in his judgment of Earth. There was clearly much more to this planet and its inhabitants than met the eye, and he, Zaxlor of Centauri Prime, was now determined to uncover all its secrets. Changing perspectives. As the days passed, Zaxlor found himself increasingly fascinated by the complexities of Earth culture. His encounter with Sarah and Buddy had opened his eyes to the possibility that there was more to this planet than he had initially assumed, and he threw himself into his cultural exchange mission with newfound enthusiasm. One sunny morning, Jake arrived at the hotel with an excited gleam in his eye. "Ready for something special today, Zaxlor. We're going to visit an animal shelter." Zaxlor's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of interest in Centaurian body language. An animal shelter. What is the purpose of such a facility? As they made their way through the city streets, Jake explained the concept of animal rescue and adoption. Zaxlor listened intently, his mind whirling with new ideas and questions. "So, these shelters care for animals that have no homes?" he asked, his upper eyes wide with surprise. "And humans then choose to take these animals into their dwellings, despite having no prior connection to them?" Jake nodded. "Exactly. It's a way of giving animals a second chance at a happy life, and for humans to find loving companions." When they arrived at the shelter, Zaxlor was immediately struck by the cacophony of barks, meows, and other animal sounds. A kind-faced woman greeted them at the entrance. "Welcome to Second Chance Animal Shelter. I'm Dr. Maria Lopez, the head veterinarian here. You must be our extraterrestrial visitor. It's an honor to meet you." Zaxlor shook her hand, still marveling at the human custom. "The honor is mine, Dr. Lopes. I am eager to learn about your work here." As Dr. Lopes led them through the facility, Zaxlor was overwhelmed by the sheer variety of animals. Dogs of all sizes and breeds, cats in every color imaginable, and even smaller creatures like rabbits and guinea pigs filled the enclosures. Many of these animals were abandoned or rescued from abusive situations, Dr. Lopes explained, her voice tinged with sadness. "We provide them with medical care, food, and shelter until we can find them loving homes." Zaxlor's lower eyes narrowed in confusion. "I don't understand. Why would humans abandon these creatures they claim to love?" Dr. Lopes sighed. "Unfortunately, not all humans are responsible pet owners. Some underestimate the commitment required to care for an animal. Others face life changes that make it difficult to keep their pets. And sadly, some simply don't value the lives of these animals as they should." This information troubled Zaxlor deeply. The concept of forming a bond with an animal only to abandon it seemed cruel and illogical. Yet, as they continued their tour, he was struck by the dedication and compassion shown by the shelter staff and volunteers. They paused at an enclosure housing a large older dog with graying fur. The animal's eyes were clouded, and it moved with a noticeable limp. "This is old Ben," Dr. Lopes said softly, kneeling to scratch behind the dog's ears. "He's been with us for almost a year now. Given his age and health issues, it's unlikely he'll be adopted. But we'll make sure he's comfortable and loved for whatever time he has left." Zaxlor felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. "You continue to care for him, despite knowing he may never leave this facility. Is that not an inefficient use of resources?" Dr. Lopes stood, meeting Zaxlor's gaze with a steady look. "Mr. Zaxlor, every life has value. Old Ben may not be young or healthy, but he still has love to give and receive. Compassion isn't about efficiency. It's about recognizing the worth in all living beings." Her words resonated deeply with Zaxlor. On Centaurus Prime, resources were carefully allocated based on utility and potential return on investment. The idea of expending effort and resources on a creature with no practical value was foreign. And yet, he couldn't deny the nobility of the concept. As they continued their tour, Zaxlor found himself increasingly moved by the stories of the animals and the humans who cared for them. He watched as volunteers patiently socialized frightened cats, played with energetic puppies, and gently groomed elderly dogs. Near the end of their visit, they stopped at an enclosure housing a small three-legged dog. Despite its disability, the animal hopped over to greet them, its tail wagging furiously. "This is Tripod," Jake said, reaching down to pet the enthusiastic dog. "He was hit by a car and lost his leg, but you'd never know it from his attitude." Zaxlor knelt down, allowing Tripod to sniff his hand. The dog responded by showering his fingers with warm, wet licks. "His spirit seems undiminished by his injury," Zaxlor observed, marveling at the creature's resilience. Dr. Lopes nodded. "Animals have an incredible capacity to adapt and find joy, even in difficult circumstances. They can teach us a lot about resilience and living in the moment." As they prepared to leave the shelter, Zaxlor found himself reluctant to go. The experience had affected him profoundly, challenging many of his preconceptions about the value of life and the nature of compassion. "Dr. Lopez," he said, turning to the veterinarian, I am deeply impressed by the work you do here. On my world, we have nothing like this. We view animals primarily as resources to be used, not as beings worthy of such care and devotion. I believe we may have much to learn from your approach." Dr. Lopes smiled warmly. "Thank you, Mr. Zaxlor. I'm glad we were able to show you this aspect of human culture. Perhaps you could share what you've learned here with your own people." Zaxlor nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, I believe I shall. This experience has given me much to consider." As they left the shelter, Jake noticed Zaxlor's pensive mood. "So, what did you think of the animal shelter?" Zaxlor was quiet for a moment before responding. "It was enlightening. I find myself reevaluating many of my initial impressions of your species. The compassion and dedication I witnessed today speak to a depth of character I had not anticipated in humans." Jake smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. You know, caring for animals isn't just good for them. It's good for us too. Studies have shown that pet ownership can reduce stress, lower blood pressure, and even increase longevity in humans." This piqued Zaxlor's interest. "Fascinating. So this relationship provides mutual benefits beyond mere companionship." "Absolutely," Jake confirmed. "The human-animal bond is a powerful thing. It can teach us empathy, responsibility, and unconditional love. In many ways, our relationships with animals make us better humans." As they made their way back to the hotel, Zaxlor found his mind buzzing with new ideas and perspectives. He thought back to his initial impressions of Earth, the chaos, the noise, the apparent inefficiency, and realized how narrow his view had been. Yes, human society was messy and often illogical by Centaurian standards, but it was also filled with a warmth and compassion that was rare on his homeworld. The way humans opened their hearts not just to each other, but to other species entirely, spoke to a capacity for love that transcended rational thought. That night, as Zaxlor prepared his daily report for the cultural exchange program, he found himself struggling to put his experiences into words. How could he explain the profound impact of what he had witnessed to his people back home? Finally, he began to record. "My fellow Centaurians, I write to you today with a sense of humility and wonder. In my time on Earth, I have encountered aspects of sentient existence that we on Centauri Prime have long overlooked. The human capacity for empathy and compassion, particularly towards non-sentient species, is both baffling and inspiring. Today, I visited a facility known as an animal shelter. Here, humans dedicate their time and resources to caring for abandoned and injured animals, with no expectation of practical return on their investment. They do this out of a pure desire to alleviate suffering and provide love to creatures that cannot repay them in any tangible way. I have come to believe that this capacity for interspecies compassion is not a weakness, as we might have assumed, but a profound strength. It speaks to an emotional intelligence and a recognition of the interconnectedness of all life that we would do well to consider. I find myself questioning many of our long-held beliefs about the nature of progress and the measure of an advanced civilization. Perhaps true advancement lies not just in technological achievement or efficient resource allocation, but in the expansion of our circle of empathy and care. I look forward to sharing more of my insights as this cultural exchange continues. For now, I urge you all to consider, what might we learn from the human practice of pet companionship? How might it enrich our own society if we were to open our hearts to the other species that share our world? With newfound wonder, Zaxlor. As he ended the recording, Zaxlor felt a sense of excitement he hadn't experienced since his youth. He had come to Earth expecting to teach, but instead found himself learning lessons he had never anticipated. And his journey, he realized, was far from over. Looking out over the glittering New York skyline, Zaxlor felt a growing affection for this chaotic, compassionate planet. There was still much to discover, and he was eager to see what other surprises Earth and its inhabitants had in store for him. Cultural exchange. As Zaxlor's time on Earth progressed, he found himself increasingly immersed in human culture. His experiences at the animal shelter had sparked a genuine curiosity about other aspects of human life, and he approached each new day with an open mind and eager anticipation. One morning, Jake arrived with an intriguing proposition. "Zaxlor, how would you like to spend a day with a human family? I've arranged for you to visit the Thompsons. They're a typical middle-class family, and they're excited to show you what daily life on Earth is like." Zaxlor's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in excitement. "That sounds like an excellent opportunity for cultural exchange. I would be honored to accept their invitation." A short time later, they arrived at a modest suburban home. The front yard was neatly manicured, with colorful flowers lining the pathway to the door. As they approached, the door swung open, revealing the smiling couple and 2 children. "Welcome," the woman said warmly. "I'm Lisa Thompson, and this is my husband, Mark. These are our children, Emily and Tyler. And of course, this is Max." She gestured to a large, friendly-looking dog wagging its tail beside her. Zaxlor inclined his head in greeting. "I am Zaxlor of Centauri Prime. Thank you for welcoming me into your home." The family ushered him inside, and Zaxlor was immediately struck by the warmth and lived-in feel of the house. It was a far cry from the sterile, efficient dwellings of Centauri Prime. Photos lined the walls, toys were scattered about, and the air was filled with the enticing aroma of something cooking. "I hope you don't mind, but I thought we'd start with lunch," Lisa said. "I've prepared a variety of Earth foods for you to try." As they gathered around the dining table, Zaxlor marveled at the array of dishes before him. There were foods of different colors, textures, and aromas, many of which he had never encountered before. "This is fascinating," he said, his lower eyes examining a slice of pizza while his upper eyes took in the rest of the spread. "On Centauri Prime, meals are primarily for sustenance. We have nutrition capsules designed to meet our dietary needs efficiently. This variety is quite remarkable." Mark chuckled. "Well, here on Earth, food is about more than just nutrition. It's a way to bring people together, to share experiences and cultures. Every dish has a story." As they ate, the Thompsons explained the origins and cultural significance of each dish. Zaxlor found himself captivated by the way food seemed to intertwine with human history and tradition. After lunch, Emily and Tyler eagerly showed Zaxlor their rooms. He was amazed by the array of toys, books, and personal items that filled the spaces. "These objects, they're not strictly necessary, are they?" Zaxlor asked, picking up a stuffed animal from Emily's bed. Emily shook her head. "No, but they're special to us. They help us learn, play, and express ourselves." This concept of personal expression through possessions was novel to Zaxlor. On Centauri Prime, living spaces were designed for maximum efficiency, with little room for individual touches. As the afternoon progressed, Zaxlor observed the family's interactions with fascination. He watched as Mark helped Tyler with his homework, noting the patience and encouragement the father showed. He saw Lisa and Emily working together in the kitchen, preparing a batch of cookies while sharing laughs and stories. Throughout it all, Max the dog was a constant presence, offering affection and comfort to each family member in turn. Zaxlor was particularly struck by how seamlessly the pet fit into the family dynamic. "Max seems to play a significant role in your family unit," Zaxlor observed as he watched Emily throw a ball for the dog in the backyard. Lisa nodded, smiling fondly at the scene. "He's been with us since before the kids were born. In many ways, he's helped shape who we are as a family. The kids have learned responsibility by helping to care for him, and he's always there to offer comfort when someone's had a bad day." As evening fell, the family gathered in the living room for what they called movie night. Zaxlor found himself curled up on the couch, surrounded by the Thompsons, as they watched a classic Earth film together. The experience was unlike anything he had known on Centauri Prime. The shared laughter, the collective gasps at dramatic moments, the warmth of bodies pressed together in companionable silence. It all spoke to a level of emotional intimacy that was rare in his own society. As the credits rolled, Zaxlor felt a strange lump in his throat. "Thank you," he said softly, looking around at the family. "This day has been illuminating. You have shown me aspects of human life that I never could have understood from mere data or observation." Mark smiled, reaching out to pat Zaxlor on the shoulder, a gesture the alien had come to recognize as one of friendship. "We're glad you enjoyed it, Zaxlor. You know, a lot of people might look at our life and see nothing special. We're not rich or famous. We don't have the most advanced technology. But what we do have is each other, and that's what matters most." Lisa nodded in agreement. Family, love, connection. These are the things that give our lives meaning. Whether it's the bond between parents and children, between spouses, or even between humans and their pets, these relationships are what make life rich and worthwhile. As Zaxlor prepared to leave, each family member hugged him goodbye, another human custom he had come to appreciate. Even Max the dog came to lick his hand one last time. On the ride back to his hotel, Zaxlor was uncharacteristically quiet, lost in thought. Jake, sensing his mood, asked, "So, what did you think of your day with the Thompsons?" Zaxlor was silent for a moment before responding. I think I understand now why humans have achieved what they have, despite what we on Centauri Prime would consider inefficiencies in your society." "Oh," Jake prompted, curious. "Yes," Zaxlor continued. "Your capacity for emotional connection, for finding joy and meaning in relationships and shared experiences, it drives you in ways we had not considered. The Thompsons may not be advancing scientific knowledge or pushing the boundaries of technology, but they are nurturing the next generation, creating a home filled with love and support. In its own way, that is a profound achievement." Jake nodded, a small smile on his face. "You know, Zaxlor, I think you're starting to understand what makes us human." That night, as Zaxlor prepared his report for Centauri Prime, he found himself struggling to put his experiences into words. How could he convey the warmth of a family meal, the joy of a child's laughter, the comfort of a pet's unconditional love? In the end, he simply wrote, "My fellow Centaurians, I fear our understanding of advancement and civilization may be incomplete. There are forms of progress that cannot be measured by technological achievement or resource efficiency. The humans have mastered an art we have long neglected, the art of connection, of finding meaning and joy in the simple act of living and loving. Perhaps it is time for us to reevaluate our own priorities." As he sent off the report, Zaxlor gazed out at the New York skyline. The city that had once seemed chaotic and overwhelming now felt alive with possibility. He realized that in his short time on Earth, he had changed in ways he never could have anticipated. And as he drifted off to sleep, lulled by the distant sounds of the city, Zaxlor found himself looking forward to what other discoveries awaited him in the remaining days of his Earth journey. Departure and reflection. The final days of Zaxlor's Earth visit flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Armed with his new perspective, he approached each experience with enthusiasm and open-minded curiosity. He visited schools where he marveled at the creativity fostered in young humans. He toured art museums, initially puzzled by the concept of creating objects solely for aesthetic pleasure, but gradually coming to appreciate the depth of emotion and thought expressed in each piece. On his last full day on Earth, Jake had a surprise planned. "We're going to a place that I think will bring together everything you've learned about humanity," he said with a mysterious smile. Their transport took them out of the city, winding through picturesque countryside until they arrived at a sprawling complex nestled in a verdant valley. A sign at the entrance read, "Happy Tales Animal Sanctuary." "What is this place?" Zaxlor asked, his 4 eyes wide with curiosity. "It's a special kind of animal shelter," Jake explained as they walked through the gates. "It's a forever home for animals that can't be adopted out to families. Many of them have special needs or behavioral issues that make them unsuitable as pets. But here, they get to live out their lives in peace and comfort." As they toured the sanctuary, Zaxlor was struck by the diversity of animals. There were dogs and cats, of course, but also horses, pigs, goats, and even a few exotic species. Each animal had its own story, often one of hardship and resilience. They paused by an enclosure housing a large, battle-scarred dog. "This is Sergeant," said the sanctuary worker leading their tour. "He's a former military dog who developed severe PTSD after his handler was killed in action. He couldn't adjust to civilian life, but here, he's found peace." Zaxlor watched as Sergeant basked in the sun, his scared muzzle resting on his paws. "You provide for him, despite his inability to serve a function." The worker nodded. "Every life has value, Mr. Zaxlor." Sergeant served his country bravely. "Now it's our turn to serve him by giving him a safe, happy retirement." As they continued their tour, Zaxlor saw humans working tirelessly to care for these animals. Volunteers mucked out stalls, prepared special meals for animals with dietary restrictions, and provided physical therapy for injured creatures. "The effort expended here is considerable," Zaxlor observed, "and there is no tangible return on this investment." Jake smiled. "The return isn't something you can measure in traditional terms. It's in the knowledge that we're doing the right thing, that we're reducing suffering and providing joy to creatures who have known too little of it. And in doing so, we become better ourselves." As the day wore on, Zaxlor found himself deeply moved by what he witnessed. The selflessness, the compassion, the unwavering commitment to caring for these animals. It spoke to an aspect of humanity he had only begun to understand during his visit. Before they left, the sanctuary's director approached them. "Mr. Zaxlor, we heard about your visit and your interest in Earth's animals. We were wondering if you'd like to make a special connection today." Intrigued, Zaxlor followed the director to a quiet corner of the sanctuary. There, in a soft bed of blankets, lay a small three-legged puppy. "This is Hope," the director said softly. "She was born with a deformed leg that had to be amputated. In the wild, she wouldn't have survived. Many humans would have seen her as too much work, but here we see her potential for joy and love." As if on cue, Hope lifted her head and let out a small, squeaky bark. Her tail began to wag furiously as she caught sight of Zaxlor. "Would you like to hold her?" the director asked. Hesitantly, Zaxlor nodded. With gentle guidance, he scooped the tiny puppy into his forearms. Hope immediately began to shower his face with enthusiastic licks, her whole body wiggling with excitement. In that moment, cradling this small, imperfect, yet utterly joyful creature, Zaxlor felt something shift within him. A warmth spread through his chest, and he felt his eyes grow moist with an emotion he couldn't quite name. I think I understand now," he said softly, his voice thick. "This is what it means to be human, isn't it? To see the value in all life, to offer love and care even when it's not logical or efficient, to find joy in connection, whether it's with your own species or another." Jake nodded, his own eyes glistening. "That's a big part of it, yes. We're far from perfect, but at our best, this is what humanity strives for." As they prepared to leave the sanctuary, the director approached Zaxlor once more. "Mr. Zaxlor, we have a proposition for you. We know you're returning to your home planet soon, but we wondered if you'd be interested in becoming an interplanetary ambassador for Hope. You could receive updates on her progress, share her story with your people, and help foster understanding between our worlds." Zaxlor felt a surge of emotion. "I would be honored," he said, his four eyes blinking rapidly to hold back tears he didn't know he could shed. The next day, as Zaxlor prepared to board his ship back to Centauri Prime, he found himself reluctant to leave. Earth, which had initially seemed so chaotic and primitive, now felt like a second home. Jake stood with him at the spaceport, a sad smile on his face. "It's been an honor showing you our world, Zaxlor. I hope you'll take what you've learned here and share it with your people." Zaxlor nodded solemnly. "I will do more than that, Jake. I intend to advocate for closer relations between our worlds. There is much we can learn from each other." As the ship's engines hummed to life, Zaxlor took one last look at the Earth skyline. He thought of the Thompsons and their warm family life, of Dr. Lopes and her dedication to animals in need, of Little Hope and her indomitable spirit. Settling into his seat, Zaxlor began to compose his final report to Centauri Prime. My fellow Centaurians, as I conclude my visit to Earth, I find myself profoundly changed. I came to this planet expecting to find a primitive world with little to offer our advanced civilization. Instead, I discovered a richness of spirit, a depth of compassion, and a capacity for love that challenges everything we thought we knew about progress and civilization. The humans' relationship with their animal companions, in particular, has opened my eyes to new possibilities. These interspecies bonds speak to a level of empathy and emotional intelligence that we would do well to emulate. I propose that we reconsider our stance on Earth and its inhabitants. Rather than viewing them as a primitive species to be studied, we should see them as potential partners in our journey through the cosmos. Their emotional wisdom combined with our technological advancements could lead to a brighter future for both our worlds. As we look to the stars and dream of further exploration, let us not forget the lessons Earth has taught me, that true advancement lies not just in our technological achievements, but in our capacity for compassion, our willingness to connect across boundaries, and our ability to find joy and meaning in the simple act of caring for others. With hope for our shared future, Zaxlor. As the ship broke through Earth's atmosphere, Zaxlor felt a mixture of sadness and excitement. He was leaving behind a world that had changed him profoundly, but he was carrying with him new understanding, new purpose, and a tiny photo of a three-legged puppy named Hope. The vastness of space stretched out before him, but for the first time, it didn't feel cold or empty. Instead, it was full of possibility. Somewhere out there, Earth was spinning, teeming with life and love. And Zaxlor knew that no matter how far he traveled, a part of his heart would always remain with the chaotic, beautiful, compassionate planet that had taught him the true meaning of humanity.